He divorced me when I was 50 and moved his new wife into our house. He said I was too old. Too boring, that after 25 years, he needed someone more vibrant. Then he handed me the divorce papers, married his mistress, and brought her into the home I had paid for. They thought I would quietly step aside, disappear, as if I had never existed. But they forgot one thing: that house was never just his. I still held ownership. Before we begin, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. If you feel comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I was 50 when the man I had called my husband for nearly 3 decades said goodbye. We sat at the old kitchen table, the one that had been the stage for rushed breakfasts, where I used to pack his lunch, where our son's laughter once echoed every night. That day, Greg wouldn't look me in the eye. He just stared into the steam rising from his coffee. Then his voice broke the silence, quiet, but sharp enough to tear through the air. "Ella, I think we're just not right for each other anymore." Not right. As if I were a worn-out shirt he'd worn for too long and now wanted to toss into the back of the closet. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, louder than the ticking clock. I said nothing, just sat still and tried not to spill the trembling cup of tea in my hands. In my mind, memories played in reverse, like a film reel: our simple wedding, moving into our first tiny apartment, turning down a promotion at the bank because his work schedule was too erratic. Someone had to be home with the baby. That someone was me. I used to think love meant sharing. But to him, I was just the backdrop that made the brighter things shine. I didn't ask why. I'd already seen the answer in his evasive eyes. I was the one who handled every meal, cleaned every corner, paid every bill on time. I took care of his mother for 2 years while she was sick. Never once complained. And what I got in return was divorce papers, handed to me on a Tuesday morning. No anger, no tears, just a deep silence inside me. The kind of silence you only hear when something has truly died, with no hope left to save it. When Greg left the house, he didn't just leave an empty space on the other side of the bed. He left a hole in my heart, a hole once filled with sacrifices I never named. We were together for 27 years, and in all those years, I never asked for more than a little respect, a little peace. But now, looking back, I wonder, was I ever truly seen? I remember the day I found out I was pregnant with Darius. The bank I worked at had just offered me a promotion to regional manager. A rare opportunity, especially for a woman. But Greg was working shifts, with no stable hours. He said, "Maybe you should quit or cut back your hours, because I can't manage everything." I nodded, not because I was weak, but because I believed our family needs me. And from that moment on, I stepped back, gave the spotlight to him, to our child, to everyone else's needs. I became the breakfast maker, the school dropper, the one waiting for the plumber, the one who remembered the tax deadlines, the one who cared for his mother in her final days, the one who did everything except live for herself. I didn't blame anyone back then. I even felt happy. Happy to see our child grow up strong. Happy when Greg could focus on work. Happy when his mother looked at me and gave a faint nod, as if to say I'd done right. But now, when that man tells me I'm too old and that he needs someone more lively, I no longer see those years as noble. I see myself as an old notebook, every page filled, only to be thrown away when someone wants a fresh sheet, not because I had no value left, but because I gave so much and forgot to keep even a little for myself. I never asked to be praised. I just wanted standing in that kitchen I had spent a lifetime keeping warm for someone to look at me and really see me. As for Greg's affair, I didn't find out through strange perfume or late nights. No, he didn't hide it. I just never imagined it would be her, Bridget. A name like a sugar candy light on the tongue, but with a sharp aftertaste. He once introduced her to me at a company party colleague from accounting. He said, his hand gently resting on her back in a gesture that seemed harmless. She smiled at me with a smile that wasn't real. And I, being the polite wife, smiled back. I remember she was 34 then, the same age as my son Darius. Maybe the most painful part wasn't finding out Greg had an affair. It was realizing he had chosen someone who had once been part of my life. Someone who had shaken my hand politely, who had stepped into my home under the label of colleague. She knew who I was, and she still walked in, as if he had never existed. Greg didn't move into a hotel or rent a place temporarily while sorting things out. No, he moved straight into her house, or rather, that's how they wanted me to see it. They weren't discreet. Even their travel photos were plastered everywhere, those dazzling white smiles on the beach. Red wine glasses in Napa. Sunlight warming the faces of two people I had once believed were just co-workers. I looked at those photos from the single chair in my living room, the same one where I had rocked Darius to sleep, where I used to drape a blanket for Greg whenever he had a cold. Now that space was silent, no footsteps, no scent of food, just me and the raw feeling of being replaced. Darius, my son, tried to stay neutral. He said, "I don't want to take sides." I gave him a faint smile and replied, "You don't have to. Honey, I already know exactly where everyone stands." That was when I understood something bitter sometimes. People don't have to betray you with actions. All they have to do is stay silent while you're being hurt, and that's enough. That morning, I wasn't expecting anything special. I just went out to check the mailbox like I did every Monday. An electricity bill, a grocery flyer, and a pink envelope. It stood out from the pile of dull papers, looking like a birthday party invitation for someone's daughter. But when I picked it up, my fingers tightened instinctively. I recognized the familiar, curvy handwriting Bridget. I opened the letter slowly, trying to stay calm. Like someone opening a medical result, they already know deep down what it says, but they're not quite ready to hear it. Blush pink paper, black ink, a tone so gentle it felt like mockery. Dear Elaine, please arrange a time to collect the rest of your belongings. Greg and I are settling in and would appreciate beginning this new chapter without disruptions. Mornings work best. Sincerely, Bridget Foster. Bridget Foster. She signed with my last name, the one I'd carried for nearly 30 years. Signed it like it belonged to her. Like I was just a brief prologue to the story she was now writing. I sat for a long time at the kitchen table. The tea beside me had gone cold. The letter lay open like a slap delivered without a sound. I wasn't trembling from sadness. I was trembling from rage. Not the kind that flares up like fire, but the kind that simmers quietly deep and hot. Like embers after a blaze. That house wasn't just a place to live. It was where I had scraped together every penny for the down payment. Where I stayed up late balancing bills. Where I planted my first rose bushes after too many winters of failure. That house didn't belong solely to Greg. And she, the one who so brazenly signed my name, had forgotten one crucial fact. My name was still on the deed. I don't know what exactly made me call Monica that afternoon. Maybe it was the pink letter. Or the emptiness I saw in my own eyes in the mirror. Whatever it was, that phone call woke up a part of me I thought had gone quiet forever. Monica was my best friend since college and a well-known attorney who used to joke, "If I pick up a pen, someone's packing their bags through the back door." I never thought I'd need that sharpness. Until now. I told her everything: how Greg left, how Bridget moved in, and how I was invited to collect my things from what was still my own home. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Monica asked, slowly, "Your name is still on the title, right?" I blinked. Yes. Greg never changed it. He said years ago, It was too much hassle. And he never paid you for your share of the house. I shook my head. Then remembered she couldn't see me. No, we never did any paperwork. Monica let out a breath soft, like someone hearing good news on a battlefield. Elaine, that means, legally, you still own half the house. I was silent. And if you want, she continued, I can help you file a partition action. It's a legal move where the court forces them to either buy out your share or sell the house and split the proceeds. I didn't respond right away. I just looked out the window, where the rose bushes I'd planted last spring were blooming again calmly, as if nothing in my life had just fallen apart. Then I heard my own voice, slow and steady. Do it. It wasn't rebellion. It was a return to myself, to the part I had lost in the years of choosing sacrifice over asking for what I deserved. I didn't need to cry. I didn't need to scream. I just needed to do what was right for me. And for all the quiet years, I had stepped back without being seen. 2 days after the call with Monica, the first set of legal papers was filed. No noise. No warning. I didn't need to knock on the door of that old house. Didn't need explanations. Certainly didn't need permission. All I needed was a court stamp and my own signature. Don't make a scene. Monica said, let the system do the work. And I did. I stayed quiet. But this time, it wasn't resignation. It was strategy. Greg called me just 2 days after he received the notice. The phone rang while I was watering the plants on the balcony of my tiny rental apartment. I saw his name on the screen. Let it ring until the third time. Then picked up. Ella. His voice strained to sound calm. You actually hired a lawyer, yes. He paused for a few seconds. Then said, almost pleading, this doesn't have to get ugly. I thought we could handle this peacefully. I closed my eyes. Took a steady breath. You already made it ugly. I'm just matching the tone. Greg began to circle around the topic. That same voice I'd heard for nearly 30 years hedging, softly blaming, then wrapping it up with some tired moral line. Bridget's uncomfortable with you still being connected to the house. You should let it go. I didn't shout. I didn't raise my voice. I just replied, then she shouldn't be living in a house that still has my name on the deed? I heard the cold click as he hung up, but I knew this wasn't over yet. The next day, I got an email from her. Same syrupy tone, but now with a thorny edge. Elaine, you should let the past rest. The more you hold on, the more pitiful you seem. Greg deserves a fresh start. And you should know when it's time to step aside. I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Monica. Can we move things along? I asked. On the other end, she gave a soft chuckle. You've waited almost 30 years. A few more weeks won't kill you. But if you want, then yes. Now we don't make noise. We get to work. I hadn't planned to return to that house anytime soon. I didn't need to because legally, I still owned half. But after the pink letter and Bridget's condescending tone, I felt, entitled, not to create chaos, but to show up. That day, I drove straight to what used to be my home. Every tile in the driveway, every rose bush on the porch I had picked, planted, and cared for them. And now, right there in the worn-out driveway, was Bridget's gleaming white BMW, parked exactly where Greg had kept his car for 20 years. I took a deep breath. It wasn't quite anger I felt, but something harder to name, like stepping into an old dream where everything looks the same, but nothing belongs to you anymore. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I used the key, the one Greg had never thought to change. I walked in. The wooden floors were still old, but they no longer sounded familiar beneath my feet. The living room was completely different. The family portrait that once hung above the fireplace was gone. In its place, a series of framed quotes like "good vibes only" and "love wins." I gave a dry laugh. A Pinterest version of betrayal. In the kitchen, the small details of my former life had been erased. The spice rack was gone. The ceramic jar I used for my favorite tea bags now held organic lollipops. The space was familiar, but the soul had been stripped out. Bridget came down the stairs in an old t-shirt. I recognized it instantly. It was the one Greg used to wear when washing the car outside. She froze when she saw me, her eyes sharp with alarm. "What are you doing here?" I held up my phone, opened her email, and read it word for word. "You asked me to come pick up my things. I came." She pressed her lips together. "You were supposed to schedule. We have boundaries now." I walked past her, calm, like I was strolling through my own memories. "As long as my name is still on that deed?" "Boundaries is a word you should use carefully." She flushed, her voice cold and clipped. "Greg will hear about this." I didn't look back. He should have been the one opening the door if he still remembers what manners are. I only took a few small things: a box of books, some old letters, the necklace my mother left me. I didn't need much. I didn't want to stay in that place anymore. Not because I couldn't, but because I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. Bridget trailed behind me with crossed arms and a mocking stare. I heard her mutter under her breath, "Pathetic." I stopped, turned around, looked directly into those eyes that tried to seem sharp, but all I saw was instability. "You think I'm just some bitter woman who couldn't keep her husband? So now I'm playing petty games." I didn't shout, didn't smash a glass. I just gave a small, knowing smile. "You call this a game, but I'm not playing. I'm reclaiming what's mine. And you should remember, better doesn't always mean forever." Then I walked out of that house, light as air, as if no one had ever made me forget my worth. Maybe you've walked with me through much of this, each step, each hurt, each breath held tight inside the place I once called home. I just want to ask gently, how are you feeling? Hearing all of this, have you ever felt like a shadow in your own home, or stayed silent just to hold on to something you thought was love? If you're comfortable, leave a small note, just a dot, or something simple, like "I understand," so I know you've walked a path like mine. This is Tenacity Tales, not a place to retell old pain, but a place where hearts that have been hurt are finally hurt again. If anything here has resonated with you, if you're welcome to follow the channel so you won't miss what comes next. But only if you truly want to walk this path with me. After walking into that old house without knocking, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just felt balance being restored. I hadn't broken anything. I didn't yell, didn't throw things, didn't humiliate anyone. I simply stepped into the place I once belonged. And now, I was reclaiming fairness by refusing to let my silence be mistaken for surrender. A few days later, Greg called again. Same old voice. But this time, it carried a thread of fear. "Elaine, does this really have to be so harsh? You know, we're not exactly doing well financially right now." I didn't answer right away. I let a few seconds of silence hang in the air, like a pause between two musical notes. Then I said, "Didn't seem so harsh to you when you handed me divorce papers at the kitchen table." "Did it?" Greg sighed. "Bridget, she's really uncomfortable with you still hanging around." I gave a soft laugh, not out of amusement, but the kind of laugh that comes when you've finally seen everything clearly. "Well then, maybe she should have picked a house that doesn't still have my name on the deed." He hung up. This time, I didn't feel empty. I felt steady. Because I had learned sometimes, you don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to sign in the right place and stay quiet at the right moment. And just as I expected, she didn't stay still. Bridget sent another email, no longer sweet, now laced with bitterness and fear. She wrote, "You're making a fool of yourself. Younger people deserve happiness too. You're clinging to a marriage that's been dead for a long time. Let it go." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because silence, this time, was the most powerful answer. I just picked up the phone and called Monica. "Can we push harder? Now we can," she said. Time to turn up the heat. The official documents were delivered to Greg and Bridget that Monday morning. My name, right at the top, Elaine Foster, co-owner, not ex-wife, not nuisance, not someone who should step aside and know her place, but a legal stakeholder in the home they thought they had taken over entirely. I didn't hand it to them in person. I didn't need to stand there and say, "I'm not joking." I just let the court stamp speak for me. Monica told me to do nothing else. Let the paperwork do the talking. The quieter you are, the more nervous they get. I listened. I didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't post anything online. I just kept working. Drinking tea. Watering my plants. And waiting. 3 days later, Greg called. I let it ring 4 times before answering. His voice was urgent, but still trying to sound familiar. "Elaine, we need to talk." "Then talk. Why are you doing this? Are you really going to force us to sell the house?" I smiled. Light as if I were discussing the weather. "You say that like I'm not one of the homeowners. You know we can't afford to buy you out right now." "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you moved her in." He went quiet for a moment. Then his tone changed. No longer angry. Just something worn out. Almost sorrowful. "Elaine, you don't have to go through all this stress." "You're right," I said. "I don't have to. But the person who made me go through it was you." I hung up. No shaking hands. No tears. Just a period ending an old habit, forgiving too quickly. Giving in too easily. 2 days later. The caller wasn't Greg. It was Bridget. This time, she didn't text. She called. Her voice was tight, choked with sobs on the other end. "You're tearing our lives apart. Don't you see that you're making us look bad? Making us miserable." I stayed silent, listening to her cry. Didn't interrupt. Didn't laugh. I let her despair ring louder than any excuse she could offer. Then she said, "Please, be a decent woman." I took a deep breath and answered slowly, "Being a decent woman means knowing your worth, and I no longer shrink myself to make others comfortable." I hung up, and this time, I blocked her number. From now on, only the lawyer would speak for me, because I didn't need to argue with people who thought I'd stay silent forever. After that, I stopped speaking. I didn't reply to texts, didn't answer calls, didn't respond to emails. I didn't need to say anything else because now, every sentence was already written in court, documents clear, factual, and without emotion. Monica told me, "Don't make noise. Let the paperwork do the cutting. Not your words." And I did exactly that. Greg kept trying to reach out, calling, texting, even writing a letter by hand, maybe for the first time in over a decade. I didn't read it. I didn't need to hear his explanations anymore. I had heard enough. I had spent years in waiting, hearing "I'll fix it soon." I'm too busy. Don't make a big deal enough times to learn if someone won't listen when you're speaking gently. They don't deserve to hear you when you finally walk away. Bridget didn't cry this time either. Now she wrote an email. The pleading was gone, replaced by accusations. "You're so petty. Why won't you let younger people be happy? You're clinging to the past while we just want a new beginning." I said nothing. I didn't send a reply. I simply forwarded the email to Monica. With a short note, "I think it's time to push harder." Monica replied with just 2 words. "Understood." That night, I sat in my small apartment, poured myself a glass of wine, and didn't turn on the overhead lights, just let the warm amber glow filter softly through the curtains. I didn't play music. No television. Just quiet. But this time, it didn't feel like loneliness. It was the stillness of someone who had chosen the right strategy. On the day of the court hearing, I didn't wear heavy makeup. No bright colors. No flashy. I chose a simple gray dress, a light knit coat, and the low-heeled shoes I always wear when I want to feel grounded. I didn't walk into that courtroom as someone trying to win back love. I walked in as a woman who knew exactly what she owned. Greg and Bridget sat on the other side. I caught a glimpse of Bridget's eyes. She didn't look as smug as she did in the selfies from Napa. Greg kept his eyes down for most of it, as if avoiding eye contact might make it all disappear. I didn't look too long. There was no need. The judge glanced over the files, set them down, and spoke with the calmness of someone settling a land dispute between strangers. Based on the documents presented, Mrs. Elaine Foster remains a legal co-owner of the property. If the parties cannot reach a buyout agreement, the property must be sold and the proceeds divided accordingly. That sentence brief, impersonal, was the final punctuation mark. No drama. No arguments. Just truth. I saw Monica tilt her head and smile beside me. But I didn't smile back. Not because I was sad, but because I was watching. I was waiting. True revenge doesn't lie in winning on paper. It's in the moment when the ones who dismissed you realize they misjudged who you are. Greg said nothing as he walked out of the courtroom, but I saw the slight slump in his shoulders. Bridget walked quickly. Didn't greet anyone. She kept her sunglasses on indoors, as if shame could be hidden behind expensive plastic frames. I didn't look back, because by then, I had come far enough. There was no need to turn around anymore. After the hearing, everything started moving quickly, but not on my end. I stayed the same part-time shifts at the library, watering the plants in the afternoon, making tea each morning. The ones in a rush now were them. Just a few days later, a for sale by owner sign appeared on the lawn of the old house. I recognized every detail of that sign. It was the kind you buy from a hardware store. Bright red. Cheap white lettering. They hadn't hired an agent. I understood why, trying to save on commission, trying to control the process. But I also knew the market's unpredictable right now, and the law doesn't wait for anyone. Monica called one afternoon. They're trying to push the sale, but without an agent. I think they're planning to sell to someone they know to bypass you. I sipped my tea. Calm. Then we won't let them. She nodded, voice steady as ever. I'll contact a few agents to get a proper market appraisal. If they don't sell at fair value, the court won't approve it. I didn't need to intervene. I just let people who know the law speak for me. A week later, the amateur sign disappeared. In its place, a professional one, sturdy, clean, bearing the name of a real estate agency I recognized. I smiled faintly. Monica had called the right people. Greg texted me, "That day we need to talk about staging the house. Bridget feels hurt by how involved you've been." I read the message. Didn't respond. Then a second message came. "Maybe don't pack up too much of your stuff yet. She's feeling a bit exposed." I nearly laughed. She didn't feel exposed when wearing my nightgown, sitting at the table where I had picked out each chair, calling me a burden. But now she felt unsafe because a few old paintings were taken down. I didn't answer. I just forwarded everything to Monica. From that point on, I never set foot in that house again. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to. I wanted them to feel every wall, every corner of that place I had lived in for 27 years, and realize that, piece by piece, it was slipping from their hands. In the 5th week after the court hearing, Monica called me on a soft, rainy afternoon. Her voice couldn't hide the satisfaction. We've got an offer full market price. No contingencies. And closing in 2 weeks. I sat in silence for a moment. Not from shock, but because a quiet settled in my chest, not pain, not joy, just depth. The house I had poured my youth into was about to no longer be mine. But more importantly, it wouldn't be theirs either. Who's buying? I asked. A young black couple, Monica said, expecting their first baby. They said they fell in love with the house the first time they saw it. I closed my eyes and smiled. A new beginning, not for me, but for people who know how to value a home. That day, Greg called 3 times. I didn't answer. I was sitting at the nail salon. The color I chose was called brick dust, a deep, earthy red with a hint of brown. I love the meaning behind that name, dust from an old brick worn, but still proud. That evening, I checked my voicemail. Greg's voice trembled slightly. Elaine, this is bigger than just us. You're not really going to let strangers walk into your house and erase everything, are you? The second message came a few hours later. I know the way we ended things wasn't great, but what you're doing, it's cold. You're not leaving us anything. For the first time, he said us as if the betrayal had morphed into something legitimate, as if they were now a unit entitled to my mercy. I didn't respond. Not out of anger, but because I realized he had just said aloud what he never dared to before. That now, they were a couple, and that couple was about to lose what they thought had become solely theirs. There was no retreat left. Only transactions, legal terms, and signatures. I didn't have to be there to know things were starting to crack. Darius told me not entirely from taking my side, but no longer neutral the way he used to be. Dad's been sleeping on the couch the past few nights, he said softly, eyes downcast over his cup. I think he and Bridget have been arguing a lot. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen that side of Greg before, quiet in front of others, but cold and manipulative behind closed doors. Only this time, I wasn't the one inside to receive it, Dad said. This is what happens when you poke a sleeping bear. I nearly laughed. Greg calling me a bear. I'm not a bear. I didn't roar. I didn't rage. I didn't tear anything apart. I was paperwork. I was stamps. I was a filing deadline met on time. I asked Darius. Gently, you okay? He nodded. But I saw the conflict flicker in his eyes. I don't know who to side with. I didn't choose any of this. I placed my hand over his. I don't need you to take sides. I just need you to understand, silence is a choice too. And you made yours the moment you said nothing while they treated me like a stranger. Darius didn't reply right away. He just exhaled, like something deep inside had begun to crack open. Not because I forced it, but because he saw it for himself. That night, I drove past the old house, didn't stop. Didn't go in. Just glanced as I passed. The living room light was still on, but the warmth was gone. Not because the bulbs had changed, but because no one truly belonged there anymore. They were living in the house that had once been my home, but like tenants. And like all short-term tenants, they were starting to feel the last breath of something they never fully owned. I got a message from Monica on a Friday morning. They've filed for an extension 4 more hours for final cleanup. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. I knew that feeling, packing up your life in silence, as everything slips from your grip. I had once stuffed my things into a suitcase like a guest in my own home. But this time, the roles had reversed. Once the 60-day deadline ended, if they couldn't buy out my share, they had to leave. And they couldn't afford it. Bridget wasn't working. Greg's salary hadn't changed now, burdened with legal fees, court costs, repair costs to get the house sold. I didn't have to push them out. The law had opened the door, and all they could do was walk through it. Monica said to me, "The house will be handed over in 48 hours. The buyers have scheduled their move-in. They've got 3 hours to clear everything out." I nodded. No smile. No emotion. The next morning, I drove past the house one last time, not to reminisce, but to witness. The now-listed sign was gone. A young couple stood beside a moving truck, holding hands. The woman was pregnant, gently stroking her belly as she pointed out where the bed should go. I didn't go near. I stayed across the street, watching from a distance. The house I had once poured my youth into was now becoming someone else's home, and I felt light not because I had let go of something, but because I knew it was finally being valued. That night, Greg showed up at my apartment door, unannounced. I opened the door. I wasn't surprised. He looked smaller, not thinner, but diminished, like someone worn down from the inside. "Elaine," he said, not meeting my eyes. "I came to ask you something." I folded my arms across my chest. "Yeah. Would you help us with a part of the deposit for a new place? We're kinda stuck." I raised my eyebrows. Not angry, just stunned. "You're asking for money from the woman you left?" Greg held up his hand, as if to plead. "I know it sounds terrible, but I didn't think you'd go this far." I cut in, my voice steady. "You thought I'd stay silent, that I'd accept, step aside." He didn't deny it. He nodded softly. "Without a fight. Bridget's staying at her sister's. I'm renting a room at River Park." I leaned against the door frame. "You made your choice. You moved her in before the divorce ink had even dried. And now, you're reaping what you sowed." Greg looked down at the floor. I said, softly, "You didn't just replace me. You erased me." So I did the same. "I erased you." He stood there for a long moment. Didn't ask again. Didn't explain. Then turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, steps heavy. I didn't close the door right away. I watched him go. But this time, there was nothing in me that wanted to follow. I thought that would be the end, the final scene. But life? Of course. I loves a closing twist, just to make sure there's truly nothing left to say. 2 weeks later, while I was in line at the grocery store, holding a jar of honey and a box of tea bags, I spotted a man sitting on a bench near the pharmacy. Wrinkled shirt, uncombed hair, eyes staring into nothing, like he was waiting for something that wouldn't come. It took me a few seconds to realize it was Greg. I turned my head away, not to avoid him, but because I had nothing left to give him, not even attention. But he saw me, and like an old reflex, he got up, hurried toward me. "Elaine." "Wait," I stopped, but didn't say anything, just stood there, hands clasped, gaze steady, not angry, not wounded. Greg stood in front of me, thinner. Yes, but the real difference was in his eyes. The confidence was gone. All that remained was emptiness. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I know you won't give it anymore." I nodded slightly, motioning for him to go on. "I just never thought you could do all this. The court, forcing the sale, the silence." I raised my eyebrows. "You thought I was weak." Greg shook his head. Almost a whisper. "No, I thought you were too tired to fight." I was quiet for a moment, and that was the moment I realized he wasn't wrong. I had been exhausted, so tired I no longer wanted to reclaim anything, only peace. But then I learned being tired doesn't mean surrender. It just means a pause, before standing up in a way no one saw coming. I looked him in the eyes. "You misjudged me, not because I'm gentle, but because you thought I would keep accepting." Greg lowered his head, voice barely above a whisper. Bridget left. He blinked. That quick, she said. I embarrassed her. That she gave up everything for a man who couldn't even keep a roof over her head. He tilted my head. Asked softly. And was she wrong? Greg said nothing. He didn't need to. I opened my trunk. Placed the grocery bag inside. Then turned to him. Good luck. Greg. He touched the car door. As if hoping to hold me there, Elaine. If we could go back. I shook my head. Cutting him off. We don't go back. Because I didn't just lose a husband. I lost myself when I was with you. I got into the car. Closed the door. Didn't glance at the rearview mirror. Just drove away quietly. Without looking back. I thought that moment outside my home was the final chapter. Turns out, life always finds a way to add one last page just to be sure you've really turned it. One morning, as I was making tea, a new email popped up. The name was familiar, Bridget. First message since that tearful call after the court ruling. I paused for a moment, then opened it. I wasn't expecting an apology, and I was right. It wasn't an apology. It was a guilt trip. Elaine, I know we've had our differences, but I believe women should lift each other up, not tear each other down. Forcing us to sell the house, making us lose everything. Was it worth it? Was it worth it? She actually asked me that. After everything she did, I kept reading. The tone shifted from soft to biting. Bitter. You won. But did it make you happy? Two people. A love. A future, you ripped it all apart. All for pride and spite. And finally, the closing line. I hope it was worth it. Truly. I didn't reply. I didn't delete it. I folded that email in my mind like a cold cup of tea, set it down. Untouched. Because I knew what I got back wasn't satisfaction. It was the small piece of justice I should have had a long time ago. That evening, I pulled out an old envelope from the drawer where I kept the documents, the house sale, the asset division, and a handwritten note from Monica. You didn't just claim your money. You reclaimed what was yours, respect you were never fully given. I smiled, folded the note, and put it away. Then I made myself a fresh pot of tea, sat by the window, the warm light glowing on a ceramic mug that read, unbothered and paid. I didn't need to send a reply. My silence now was the closing chapter. If you're still here, thank you, truly. Not everyone chooses to stay through stories filled with grief and endings. I just want to ask one small thing. How are you feeling at this point? Have you ever stayed silent because no one was listening? Or walked through injustice with no one to tell it to? If you'd like, leave a note, just one line, or even a simple dot to let me know someone out there feels this too. Here at Tenacity Tales, we don't rush to conclusions. We don't need loud declarations. We just need each other a space to sit, breathe, and gently unearth the truths we once kept quiet. If you saw any part of yourself in this story, you can follow the channel to catch the next chapter, to not miss the quiet, healing moments that might seem small, but are often life-changing. I don't know exactly when I began living again. There was no fireworks, no post that said I'm over it. It began silently, like a breath after a long sleep, soft, slow, but real. I took a part-time job at the local library, not because I needed the money, but because I needed to touch quiet things. I loved the feeling of my hand brushing over the spines of old books. The smell of thin paper and wood shelves calmed my chest. I was surrounded by stories not my own, but hundreds. Thousands of lives tucked between covers. There, I wasn't an ex-wife. I wasn't the one who was left. I was Miss Elaine at the lending desk, the one who remembered the kids who loved comics, who saved a sweet romance novel each Wednesday for the silver-haired lady who always came by. I learned to live without letting my past define me anymore. I lived like someone who had finally cleaned out the room in her heart neat. Clear. No longer rented out to anyone. One afternoon, while rearranging books in the back, a woman in her 40s approached me. I recognized her from our old church, though we hadn't seen each other in years. She looked at me for a moment, then said, "Elaine, I heard about what you went through. You handled it all so gracefully." I smiled, about to reply, when she leaned in and lowered her voice, and so strongly, I didn't know what to say. Not because I was shy, but because for the first time after everything I had just been called something other than pitiful. That evening, I pulled out a brand new notebook. Not the one stained with old tears and unnamed sorrows. A new one, crisp. White pages. I opened to the first page, wrote one short line. But it was true. This isn't chapter 2. This is a new book. There are things you don't realize you need until someone hands them to you. Gently, but deeply. For me, that came in the shape of a simple sentence. You handled it with strength. Not praise for patience. Not pity for betrayal. But recognition. That woman from church, she didn't need the details. She just looked at me. Someone who had walked through a storm and saw that I was still standing. And I finally understood sometimes women don't need each other for advice. They just need to be seen. The next morning, I changed my routine. I didn't turn on the news radio like I always did. Instead, I played an old playlist, the songs I used to listen to when I was still me before I was a wife. Before I became a shadow behind someone else's life, I made tea. The kind I liked, not because someone else once liked it, but because I did. I placed the cup down next to the new notebook I had started writing in. On the second page, I wrote, "Strength isn't in the scream. It's in the moment you quietly stand up. Rebuild your life without asking anyone's permission." I was beginning to understand what people meant by peace. It doesn't come from the quiet around you. It comes from knowing no one has the power to shake you anymore. No more fear of being left behind. No more craving proof that I'm enough. No more waiting for someone to return what they took from me. I didn't look for him. I didn't wonder where he was, how he was living. But like every long-buried truth, it eventually surfaced on its own. That day, I dropped by the usual market, just meant to grab a few oranges and some cinnamon. The sun was sharp. Not hot enough to be harsh, but not soft enough to be called gentle. I was wheeling my cart out the door when I saw a man sitting on the bench outside the pharmacy. Hair unkempt. Shirt wrinkled like it had been pulled from the bottom of a suitcase. Shoes untied. I took a few more steps and froze. "Greg." He looked up. I saw me, and stood up quickly. His face stripped of the confidence he once wore so easily. Gone was the man who once called me a burden and said he needed someone more alive. "Elaine?" He walked over. Voice hoarse. "I'm not here to ask for anything. I just need to talk." I nodded, stopped, but kept my distance. "I didn't think you'd go that far," he said. "The court, the lawyers, the silence, pushing it all the way." I looked at him, my eyes calm, not cold. Then I asked, "What did you think?" That I was too weak to fight back. He shook his head. The sound of confession in his voice. Not weak, just too tired. "I thought you were so tired you wouldn't have the energy to do anything." That sentence hit deeper than I expected. Because it was true. I had been tired. So tired I couldn't bother to fight, explain, or imagine reclaiming anything. But then I learned tired isn't the end. Tired is just a pause, a coiling back, a quiet wait until you rise in a way no one expects. I looked at him, steady and clear. "You miscalculated, Greg." Not because I changed, but because I stopped trying for someone who never once tried for me. He went quiet, then sighed, and said something I didn't expect. Bridget left. I paused, but I wasn't surprised. That fast, he nodded. Gave a dry laugh, she said. She was ashamed. That she gave up everything, her name, her job, her pride for someone who couldn't even hold a house together for her. And she was right. I didn't hold it together. I didn't nod. Didn't shake my head. I just asked softly, "And now, what do you think?" Greg looked at the ground, as if the answer might be buried beneath his feet. But it wasn't there. It was in the past, and no one gets to go back and retrieve what they left behind. I opened my car door. Set the bag down inside. "Good luck." "Greg." He reached out, like he wanted to say something more. But I was already in the driver's seat. Door closed. Engine on. No anger. No trembling. Just closure. After that encounter at the store, I never dreamt of the old house again. No more hazy nights wandering through empty rooms, looking for someone who once belonged there. No more waking up in the dark with that hollow ache, whispering, "It'll pass." Because now, I wasn't waiting for it to pass. I had already moved past it. Freedom doesn't arrive with a bell. There's no banner. No medal handed to the ex-wife who survived betrayal. It came on a very ordinary morning when I was brushing my hair in the mirror and felt calm. Not bitter. Not broken. Just done. I started doing small things I used to overlook. Changing pillowcases with the seasons. Buying an orchid even though I didn't know how to care for it. Choosing my morning tea based on what I liked, not what anyone else did. This kind of freedom isn't dazzling, like people paint it. It's simple. It means not needing to explain yourself anymore. Not needing to justify. Not needing to prove. I felt like a tree that had been cut down to the stump. But beneath the soil, the roots had held on. And once the ground was still, and the rain gentle, and the sun just enough, it sprouted again. No one sees that process. No one claps. But I knew I was still alive. And I had come back. That evening, I sat alone in my kitchen, sipping warm cinnamon tea. Golden light, glowing against a mug that read "Unbothered and Paid." I thought of everything I had endured, and everything I had walked through without losing myself. I no longer needed an apology. No longer needed someone to say I was right. Because deep down, I knew I no longer needed anyone's permission to be free. I didn't take revenge on Greg through tears or cruel words. I didn't post long status updates or photos begging for pity. I did one thing: I signed where I needed to. That signature, seemingly just a formality, was the moment I took the wheel of my life back. Not with rage, but with legal truth, with clarity, with every ounce of strength they never imagined I had. After the house was sold, Monica sat across from me at a small cafe down the street and slid a folder toward me. Inside was everything: the asset division, the transfer deed, the bank transaction receipts, and one final, bold, number $370. 000, the amount I received after everything. I didn't cheer. I didn't get emotional. I just closed my eyes for a few seconds. Not because I was greedy, but because I knew every dollar in that figure carried the weight of days I was dismissed and still stood tall. Monica took a sip of her tea, then tilted her head. "Any plans for the money?" I smiled gently. "No traveling. No new car. No showing off." Then I said, calm but clear, "I want to make a plan. So this money lasts longer than the betrayal." We met with a financial advisor, a black woman with natural curls, a crisp white shirt, and pearl earrings. She flipped through each page, asked precise questions without judgment. And when I finished, she looked at me, eyes bright with understanding. "We're going to make this money a reminder that they never got to take everything from you. Not your future. Not your power to rebuild. Just one closed chapter. I nodded. My heart settled like a lake after the wind dies down. I hadn't just signed off a house. I signed off a long chain of silence, sacrifice, and self-erasure. And when the bank door closed behind me that afternoon, I stepped out with a feeling that wasn't joy. It was certainty. I was no longer the one left behind. I was the one who signed her name back onto her own life. I left the old city quietly. No posts. No announcements, just Monica and Darius knew. Not because I feared judgment or gossip, but because I no longer needed an audience. I chose a small town in northern New Mexico. No one knew me. No one whispered my old name, Greg's wife. Here. I'm just Miss Foster, the woman who brings banana bread to church and hums gospel tunes while tending her garden. I live in a small, clean, quiet apartment. Not big, but everything in it belongs to me, from the light switch to the pillow on my bed. No one moves my things. No one complains about where I put my teacup. No footsteps behind me. Cold and familiar. Just me. And myself. I no longer keep social media. No need to scroll through photos of who's happy now. No need to count how many people support Greg for finding his true love. I didn't disappear to be petty. I disappeared to return to the part of me I had abandoned. Each morning, I wake up early and open the curtains to let the sunlight touch my skin. I water my flowers, make tea, pick up any book and read a few pages. Some days, I sit on my porch and listen to the wind pass through the fence. And I smile not because something happened, but because I still can. People think when a woman leaves a long marriage, she'll fall apart, lose her way. But the truth is, some of us only truly find our path once we step out from someone else's shadow. I don't need anyone to know I'm doing well. I don't need to post that I'm okay. I just need to know every step I take now is for me. I used to think silence meant weakness, that if I didn't speak up, didn't fight, I was being small. But over time, I realized silence is a choice, and sometimes it's the most powerful one. I didn't speak when I was called too boring. I didn't speak when I was replaced by someone younger, bolder. I didn't react when I got that pink letter asking me to please remove my belongings on time. I didn't explain myself when my lawyer served them court papers. I didn't speak because I was already taking action. Every email I didn't answer. Every call I let ring. Every text I passed to Monica, none of it was retreat. It was strategy. Because I knew some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be signed, sealed, and enforced. I had once bitten my tongue through so much. Dinners Greg came home late too. Without apology. The absent-minded. When I talked about my dreams. The times I watched him laugh into his phone, while I learned to smile at myself. But now I understand that very silence, when placed with precision, can carry more force than any accusation. One afternoon, while I was reading on my porch, Monica sent a short message. They moved out, left it clean but cold. Like no one ever really lived there. I didn't feel relief. I just felt right. That was no longer my home. And truthfully, it never had been theirs. I stood up, walked into the garden, took a long breath. Not because I needed to forget, but because I was finally living fully, quietly, and completely. I don't want to be anyone's symbol. I'm just a woman who lived in the dark too long enough to teach herself how to find the light again. And when I stepped out of it, not loudly, not hurriedly, I thought, is there someone else? Somewhere, still curled up like I once was, silent, enduring, waiting for someone to rescue them. I don't need to be known. But I know there are things that don't need to be seen, only done. So I set aside 50,000 from the house sale. Not everything. but not nothing, and sent it to a local legal fund that supports women. No nameplate, no photo ops, just one line in the transfer note. For the women who don't yet know they have the right to push back. A few months later, the fund director sent me a short update. It said, thanks to an anonymous contribution, 3 women have left abusive marriages. 2 of them have filed to reclaim property and custody. They're no longer alone. I read every line. Quietly. I didn't feel proud. It just felt right. Because I know what it feels like to be treated like you don't matter, and I don't want any woman to think that about herself ever again. That evening, I didn't turn on the big lights. I just lit a small candle by the window. Its glow wasn't loud. It didn't pierce the dark, but it was enough for someone out there to see there's a way out. I didn't post a status, thanking life. I just added one line to the notebook I've been writing in since this all began. Sometimes, light doesn't come from the outside. It rises through the cracks where you thought you'd broken. I didn't throw a party, didn't buy a new dress, didn't post a photo with a caption like independent, successful, radiant woman. I didn't need to, because I didn't come back to life for applause. I came back because I couldn't keep living the way I had. Monica was the first to say it. You didn't just survive. You chose to live and to live with grace. I smiled when she said it. But inside I thought, not grace for the past. Grace for myself. The first time I shared my story wasn't in therapy. It was at a women's gathering at the local community center. Monica had signed me up without asking. She just said, tell it like you're telling a little sister someone who once thought staying quiet long enough would make things okay. I almost declined. I'm not a speaker. Not someone who enjoys a room full of eyes. But when I stepped into that space filled with women red-rimmed eyes, arms locked tight, tentative smiles ready to crack, I saw myself. Not who I am now, but the woman who once cried quietly in her kitchen, unsure if her voice was still strong enough to be heard. So I told the story. No drama. No preaching. No embellishment. Just about the cold cup of tea on the breakfast table the morning Greg handed me divorce papers. About the pink letter inviting me to pick up what's left. About how I reclaimed the house not with a fight, but with a firm signature. When I finished, the room stayed quiet, but not a cold kind of silence. It was the kind people hold when something inside has just been carefully put back together. A woman came up and hugged me for a long time, then whispered in my ear, you just reminded me, it's never too late to begin again. That night, I went home without turning on the lights. I sat in the kitchen, turned on the little radio, and listened to a wordless tune. I held the mug that said unbothered and paid Monica's gift, and I laughed softly. There were no doors slamming with pain. No dreams dragging me back to that old house. No more what-ifs. Just me whole. Peaceful. Enough. No dramatic ending. No countdown clock that said journey complete. Freedom, real freedom, didn't arrive in grand form. It came one regular morning when I opened my eyes and realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. I no longer waited for Greg to apologize, or Bridget to admit fault, or Darius to take a side, or old friends to message. I know what you went through. I didn't need any of them to say anything, because I had stopped asking for permission to live. On a quiet weekend afternoon, I sat on the porch, tea in hand, sunlight soft across the rug I had washed that morning. I looked out at my tiny garden, not perfect, but Mina, every mint sprig, every tomato stem had been planted, watered, and waited for, just like I had waited patiently for myself to come back. One morning, I received a letter, no return name, but the handwriting was instantly familiar. Slanted, hurried, with those old curved loops. Bridget. I opened it. No tension, no guessing. And true enough, it wasn't an apology. Just a quiet accusation. You ruined everything. I hope you feel satisfied. 2 people. A future. A home. All gone. Do you think it was worth it? I folded the letter. Didn't tear it. Didn't burn it. Just slid it under the coaster on my kitchen table. Because I didn't need to reply. I just needed to know everything I did to survive. And to keep living. A week later, Darius invited me to dinner. Just a simple meal by a quiet stretch of beach, where my son now, a grown man, pulled out my chair like an unspoken apology. After we finished eating, he looked at me, eyes thoughtful. Thank you, Mom, for not letting them take all of you away from me. I didn't cry. I just held his hand, the way I used to when he was little, and replied softly, I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to breathe, so that if another woman is ever told she's too old, too tired, too dulla, she'll know she doesn't have to disappear, she just has to rise. That night, I wrote the final page of the notebook I'd been filling throughout this journey. Freedom isn't a door someone opens for you. It's the moment you realize you can turn the handle anytime you want. And then I set the pen down. No applause. No stage. Just me. And the rest of my life clear, light, and no longer asking anyone's permission to be lived fully. Thank you for staying with me until the very last chapter. If you're still here, maybe you too have walked your own uneven path. If you'd like, share something small, so I'll know this light has touched another heart out there. My name is Elaine Foster. I was once divorced, discarded, underestimated, and then I reminded them through law, through finances, through spirit, just who they were dealing with. They bet on the wrong woman, and now, I sleep well, I laugh often, and I never answer blocked calls. This isn't revenge. This is recovery. And this is Tenacity Tales, where the stories don't need noise to move you. If you'd like to hear more stories of quiet rebirth, you know where to find me. I'll still be here, with a warm cup of tea and another story, waiting to be told.